Hello, hope you are doing well. In this video, we intend to open up the business management technique establishment phase, and I will stipulate from A to Z. Primarily, we will review the process management establishing cycle, then each phase and their implementation steps will be discussed. As you have already seen, before establishing any management or qualitative techniques in the organization, we ought to prepare the organization to accept it, like organization behavior, culture, strategy, business management, establishing techniques phase, investigation, making engagement in the organization, and preparing the organization. We can start the second phase, which is framing and identifying the process. The two significant outputs are the process architecture and modeling the as-is process. The process architecture is process levels that include process areas, process groups, and processes. Later, we will evaluate and prioritize the processes, since we are aware that we can't commence extracting and modeling the processes simultaneously. Therefore, we design the architecture, prioritize the processes, draw as is, and switch to the next phase. In the next phase, we should conduct measurement, specified indicators, and we will evaluate the beneficiaries that will be stipulated in the following. Then we commence process analysis to be able to specify to be modeled. In this analysis, we apply diagnosis, pathology, gap analysis, and patterning to specify to be based on our improving solution. Now the processes are susceptible to be implemented in the organization, and we can apply BPMS tools. Later we will go with monitoring and incessant improvement. It is worth mentioning that in the second phase we apply the BPM2 standard, we apply BPMS software in implementation. We will stipulate what happens in each step. We already mentioned that the first phase is preparation and persuasion. We ourselves, as people who intend to establish BPM in the organization and for process and process orientation, should start the positioning that can utilize 5 phases of the positioning and can use 10 techniques to persuade organization principals and experts of the process. The next one is forming the strategic and executive committee. The executive committee is like our arms in the organization that has a coordinate role to interview and extract the process. By the same token, executive committee has a decision-making role, and we consider 5 methods for them. Then we will prepare separate and various training for strategic and executive committee, who are principals and employees respectively. Note that the organization is prepared to some limit. We can move to the next steps. To do this, we decide which methodology we establish, we analyze the methodologies and select the suitable one. We can customize that. The next subject is to find out how the organization structure and strategy is, to analyze them and determine their relations with the process management. If there is a document in the organization including pre-recorded documents like executive methods, infrastructure forms, or strategic documents, will be studied, and we will select the considered method. At first, we will determine the BPMS tools. In implementation phase, since BPMS tools its capabilities and limitations has an impact on modeling. Typically, there is a project charter in this stage. Despite the fact that we know the business management is not a project, it means that it doesn't matter, it owns starting and ending points. Since our processes have incessant improvement, they are dynamic and are susceptible to changes. However, we write it for the first time to clarify limitations, necessities, beneficiaries, deliverable goods, milestones, and so on. Moreover, we design a poster and match design to create engagement so that they may be involved. In the next part, we will talk about framing and identifying the processes. The first output in this part is process architecture. We should determine what framework, approach, and methodology will be applied to design process architecture. We level the processes, specify the process group, hold a session with the organization principals who are strategic committees to specify the processes by worksheets, categorize and position them to complete the business area. What happens in the next step is the process map. We classify the high-level processes. To access the process map, we clarify the business area into two groups, operational and management support levels, and specify the process map for the organization. It is ostensible in the process map what actions are being taken in our organization. In the next step, we select our suitable reference model by which we prepare the architecture and categorize it easily and appropriately. The next step to be taken in this phase is investigating the processes and the strategy convergence to determine the support of the process from each strategy. In this subject, we can provide a matrix in which there are strategies, strategy aims and processes that are arranged in comparison with the strategies, and their support rate is measured. We can use the N2 chart to get aware of the relations between the processes that are a structural relation matrix of the processes. In the main diameter of the processes, we put the input and output up and down respectively and specify the crossing point. We will have interactive diagrams in the next step that are data flows of the process that determines the process relations and their input and output. Cipher our processes to make an order in processes by using the framing methods, and each process will own its particular code. The next steps are being taken in this section are prioritizing and determining key processes and even mechanization coefficient. It means how much the mechanization capability of this process is. Later, we will measure the current status maturity of the organization. We can apply methods like CMMI, 8 omega, BPMM, or select a suitable method of our organization, which is to synthesize the model and measure the current status maturity. Then we can model the current processes and we can get familiar with BPMN, DMN and CMMN to model and select visual paradigm software to model the processes, then determine the mechanization coefficient of each process after modeling. When we model the current status process, we can revise the process architecture interactive and N2 chart since we have gotten further information on the process details. The second phase comes to an end here, and we enter the third phase, which is measuring the current status. To measure the status, we prepare a document under the title of Process ID in which the process aim and relations are clarified. We design process indicators and determine their efficiency and determine how to measure the indicators and how to obtain the data. We specify what reports we will have, what resources we will apply like financial, manpower, equipment and infrastructure. We will clarify the limiters, facilitators, and will conduct a beneficiary analysis and determine its relations with the strategy. For example, we say the process is suitable with which strategy of the organization. We will find out which input is where and what is the output and where it is applied. We specify the process risk management and we will prepare the executive method to organize our work. We can use FMEA, identify the risks and conduct periodical evaluation. While we are evaluating periodically and identify the problem, can take preventive steps and take reformative steps and ameliorate the processes if needed. What was the fourth phase? Exactly, analyzing. We can have qualitative and quantitative techniques that are Lean and Six Sigma. We may measure workflow, utilize the profile method. In fact, our method for the process should be consistent with the organization. Moreover, we will have quantitative analysis. We will have RCA, in which we will utilize fishbone, cause mapping, correct NELMs, Y5, 5W1H. Then we will address the value-added method, in which we will have value classification in clarifying some values turn to VA from the stockholder point of view, they will turn to BVA from the business point of view, and will be NVA when none of the mentioned ones are possible. NVA will be deleted in the first step in the organization. We may apply the experimental method, which is conducted by interviews which are done during the process modeling or gap analysis of the current status, and compare with the optimal status and bridge the gap between current and optimal status to figure out the differentiation. We can use other quantitative methods suitable for process and organization. We can utilize the visual paradigm for some analysis. You can use RACI, CRUD diagram matrix to know who does what and to specific decision-making points of the organization. You can use lane and gateway. Moreover, we can have PDF, HTML, animating, simulation, and visual div in which we can compare as is and to be processed. In this phase, a document will be prepared under the title of the process analysis and improvement document. This document has some parts like problems. We specify gap and find a solution for each, and we can design the to-be model based on the solution. The to-be model is designed, then we want to apply it in the organization. Since as is different due to some changes in comparison with the to-be, it will be specified again. Then we say what the executive actions of to-be are, what steps should be taken to implement based on the changes, and if we intend to implement, what challenges we will run across. We will revise process architecture, interactive diagram, and N2 charts. We will also measure optimal status maturity for 2B as we already had applied for as is. Eventually, we will prepare a document under the title of implementation document of the process. What is the implementation? It specifies process components to implement the details from the IT perspective. If we supply one product from the storeroom, we have already specified who, how will do it. Now we intend to say how and specify the form fields. How should the fields be? Is the field type integer, string, or date? Should the field be optimal or required? And other details that will be implemented. Our fifth phase is implementation. Here we will say what the BPMS is and what the function is, how can it help us, what are the executive tools accessible to us, what are the capabilities, how to select a suitable BPMS for the organization. If we intend to choose the best one, it won't be a difficult task since a lot of researchers has been carried out on that, but it may not be the best one. We have to select the best one for evaluating and selecting indicators. Then we will implement the process in the BPM area, develop the test. The next subject is the RPA. After mechanizing the process, we can use RPA to get the real automation of the business, since business automation has two fundamental steps that are process mechanization and process activity automation, which is conducted in RPA. We will have monitoring and controlling. We evaluate, monitor, and control the processes. We can use the PDCA cycle for that to specify reformative and preventive steps and repeat the cycle to improve and go on. I have tried to mention briefly what we are supposed to do in the business management establishment. In the next videos, it's incumbent on us to scrutinize them with more details. SAD BPM methodology, bpmcg.org.